Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful Indie Author Fringe so far. I'm Orna Ross, for those of you who don't know me, and it is my great pleasure now to talk to Mr. David Markowitz. Am I pronouncing the name properly?
Markowitz.
Markowitz. Okay,
It was
thank you.
Markovich at some point, but
Yeah,
in the US now.
it's always uncertain. The reason I thought it might be that is because I had a neighbor in Ireland actually who spelt their name that way but pronounced it the other way. So
Right.
yeah, and so you are very welcome anyway, David.
Thank you.
And you
Great to
are
be here.
from Listen Up Audio Books, and you're going to talk to us about how to produce, but mainly how to promote an audiobook. And this is something that I know people really want to hear about because audio is having its moment, isn't it?
Absolutely. I was just at the Audio Publishers Association conference earlier this week, and in New York, it was sold out for the first time ever in like days, and it clearly needs to be a bigger conference. And the numbers that are coming out around audiobooks it's pretty staggering, and it's the growth year over year.
It really is up by almost a third last year. Is that right?
Yeah, almost a third. Right, and that's and over 20% growth for the past 3-4 years.
Really, really amazing, and indie authors, such potential here. Please get on board.
Join us.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit. I mean, I know that lots of our members are on board and already doing audio and doing it rather well. But let's sort of start at the beginning for those who are not. And I know that people are a little bit daunted by the idea of the technology, finding a narrator, should they narrate themselves, those kinds of questions. So can you kind of just give us a brief whiz through
Sure.
What happens?
Sure. I think that one of the questions that you start with is to make an audiobook is not cheap, and there's really no way around that. Even if you're doing it yourself, there's going to be some expense involved. And so the value of, is there a return on investment, I think, is one of the questions. As an author, you're like, I'm going to put this money into this. Why am I doing this? And it's a good question. And, so it's something that we discuss on our end and are constantly trying to find better ways of addressing that issue. But the question you're asking when you're creating an audiobook is why are you doing this, and what are you trying to get out of it? And if it's purely money, then who goes into publishing for money first? But still, if it's purely that, that's not going to be the best way to go. But if you're looking to reach a different audience, there's a crossover of most audiobook listeners are avid readers, but there's also a nice chunk who are avid listeners first. So you're going to be reaching a slightly different audience, of really, as we just said, a growing audience. You give other options, and that idea of sort of having your presence in more places has a value. The other opportunity, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is also getting it in more places. So there are all the places where ebooks are sold, but then there are many new places where audiobooks are being sold. There are sites like TuneIn and Scribd, and Spotify in Germany has audiobooks. And it's going to keep growing. So anywhere that audio is, audiobooks will start to be part of that. Podcasting, it was one of the discussions at the conference this week. There hasn't been a lot of crossover between podcast listeners. Well, audiobook listeners who listen to podcasts is not that big, but podcast listeners who are starting to listen to audiobooks, that's becoming a gateway drug. You're like, oh wait, I want to listen to more. Why don't I just listen to this entire book? So all of these are these kind of nascent opportunities. And the last one is, and which is always a big one, 30 some odd thousand audiobooks were published last year. And that's a dramatic increase. So in 2011, I think 7,000 audiobooks were published. So even though
these are US figures, I'm assuming.
Yes, these are US figures. And so even though they've been publishing audiobooks for 20, 30 years, every year it was 1,000 audiobooks, 2,000 audiobooks. Now we're at this point where it's 30,000, but it's still a relatively small library, especially compared to
tiny if you're talking about ebooks.
Right. So discovery, it's not just another throwing something into a bucket. There's greater opportunity for discovery, and there's certainly a bunch of smart people on the audio side working on discovery in some really nice ways. So
great.
All of that combined is the why of, why think about doing an audiobook, and why put the expense in of, it's a couple $1,000 US dollars. It's kind of hard to get around it. I mean, you can do it for less, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay, we will talk about that in a second, maybe straight away, because from our point of view in Ally, we're always encouraging people to see publishing as a long-term investment, and also for indie authors who are taking their self-publishing seriously, to realize that because of digital, we're talking about a lifetime investment. So once you make a book, it's there, and it's there forever. And if you think about it in those terms, I mean, anybody starting a business of any kind has to put money in up front, and it's not actually an enormous amount of money if you market properly. So it all hinges on this session you're going to give us today, David, which will tell people how to actually sell them.
Right.
Before you speak again, could I just say to you that something is brushing against the lead of your microphone and causing a click, click, click sound. So I'm not sure if it's maybe it's your hand or something, but
okay.
Yeah, just to be a little bit careful on that, because
thank you. Is that better?
What you're saying. Yes, that is better. Thank you.
So sad that the audio guy is sorry.
Okay, so yeah, talk to us a little bit about how having said all of that, of course, budgets are tight, and it is a third format for many people.
Exactly.
Though there is an argument that it should be second, ebook first, maybe audio second, and I'm kind of warming to that argument. I would have said that a few years ago, but I think there is an argument for that now. But yeah, budgets exist. So how can people keep their costs down here?
Sure. So there are 3 ways of creating an audiobook, and really quickly, do it yourself. And that can be either as an author, you want to record it yourself, or you want to hire a narrator who can record it themselves. And there are different sites out there, voices.com, voice123, where you can find narrators. You can go on Craigslist. There are many ways of finding a narrator out in the world, and having them audition and hiring them directly. And a lot of them have home studios. Certainly the process, the technology behind recording has gotten cheaper. So that's one option, and probably one of the least expensive if you're going to record it yourself, and it's always an option. I do recommend getting a studio. I do recommend putting the expensive, don't record it at home on your phone. One of the other numbers that came out, 3/4 of audiobook buyers will always listen to a sample before they buy. And if it's not purely on quality, the quality of the audio isn't great, they're not going to listen to that book. And so it's really important that you get a studio. You don't try to record it at home unless you have a proper recording setup, which some people do. So especially with podcasting, it's becoming more common. So that's the first method. The second method is Audible's Content Exchange, which until this week was only available to people in the US or the UK, because you needed to have a US bank account and mailing address. And this week they opened it up to Ireland and Canada. So it is now expanding to other authors in other parts of the world. And the Audible Content Exchange is it's a dating service for rights holders and audiobook creators. So it's you put your rights up there, and narrators or producers can audition, and then you pick one. And it's because it's part of Audible, which is part of Amazon. It's a very well designed and well thought out platform. And then for the distribution, you get to decide if you want to do exclusive or non-exclusive, which we'll get to in a minute. The third option is something where you work with an independent producer, like Listen Up, where we have a service which is very much like ACX, but the difference is that we are able to give a little bit more service than they can. ACX, you still have to do most of it yourself. We work with all of the major publishers, and we provide the exact same service to independent authors, where you get a casting director, you get to choose the kind of voices you want. We sort of give a little bit more service for really what ends up being a couple dollars more. But on the other end of it, we also do full distribution to everywhere in the world, anywhere that audiobooks are sold. So that's something that you can't get with ACX, but you can get with us. And a little bit more of a personalized service, which, that's what we like to. Okay, there's my plug.
Okay, plug over.
So those are your three main options for producing an audiobook. And again, the price ranges, there's probably a fourth option, which would be like really hiring a full producer and doing that, but that's going to be too expensive for what you need to do.
Okay, so plug over. I was kidding in a way, because I do want to hear about how Listen Up connects with, Audible, Amazon, ACX. It's the big gorilla in the marketplace. Yes. And I know a lot of what's been going on there is coming to an end soon. But talk to me about how Listen Up fits in, with ACX. Sure.
So we are, in a very, very small way, we're a competitor to ACX. But on the production side, you can produce with ACX or you can produce with us. On the distribution side, and where we should talk about this, with ACX, you can, like I was saying, you can choose exclusive. So that distributes only through Audible, and you will have a 40% royalty on sales. Or you can go non-exclusive and get 25% royalty. And then if you do non-exclusive, wherever you distribute otherwise is pretty much up to you, which you almost can't distribute to a lot of the places as an individual. So the service that we provide is we can put your book on ACX, put your book on Audible to distribute there, but we'll also distribute to the entire library system, which is a pretty nice chunk of our market in the US is in the library system, as well as places like Scribd and TuneIn and Storytel, and in Scandinavia, and trying to get into Germany. And so we're really trying to get a worldwide market of distribution, allowing it to be in many more places. Audible, if you're in Audible, you're not in any library, which in the US, again, sales on Audible really are close to 90% of the market, or 80 some odd, that they own the retail market. But when you put libraries in there, it's getting closer to 60%. So you have 40% of your sales can be through the library system.
And Audible is on sale through bookstores, or?
Only online. Yeah. So through independent bookstores, there's a great, and I'm going to give a plug for another great company called Libro.fm, that basically is the audiobook backend for independent bookstores. So if you go to your local bookstore online and you're like, oh, I want to get an audiobook, this company Libro is working with all the independents and trying to create a robust audiobook marketplace that goes back to the indie stores.
Superb. So it's
Yeah.
kind of feels a little bit like where ebooks were about 4 or 5 years ago, kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's still nascent and still
It's
developing.
still nascent.
Yeah, which is a good time to get involved in
Mhm.
things. I speak as an early adopter of ebooks, and it was certainly was a hell of a lot easier back in the day than it is now. So yeah, so okay, that's essentially that. And if somebody wants to see more detail on the production side of things, we do have our Fringe event at London, which goes into more depth, and I'm sure lots of resources also in the Self-Publishing Advice Centre on that. But you're here today mainly to talk to us
Yes.
about how people actually get their books into the hands of, or into the ears, I was going to say into the hands of readers, into
Right.
the ears of listeners.
So I mean, when we're talking about nascent in the marketing aspect, it is still nascent as well. It's something that we at Listen Up are actively working on. And it suffers from many of the same struggles that ebooks suffer from. Discoverability is still not great, and the visibility is still difficult. And because Audible owns so much of the eyeball space, it really, a lot of times it falls up to them. Like, they will, if they highlight a book, there it is. It will sell. Which is why we really push people not to go exclusive, though there are certainly arguments to be made. I just don't, just putting all that power into one place. But so a couple of things to look at that's different about audiobooks that allows for other marketing options. One thing is, you have a narrator. You're working with someone who is reading your book closer than your editor, because they have to read every single word. They don't have a choice. So they know your book inside and out. So there are a lot of ways to work with your narrator, and most narrators today have their own social media presence. And so, sort of like a theater, a play with multiple people, if you have a narrator or multiple narrators, use them. Use them to talk about your book in their own social space. I highly recommend recording interviews with the narrator where the two of you can discuss, have a set of questions about the book, about where they can ask you about writing the book. You can ask them about narrating the book, what they found in it, because they're going to find their own, as they create these characters, they're going to find their own things that maybe you weren't thinking of. So to record that interview and use that as a promotional and marketing tool, as well as doing, we're talking with a couple of different companies about, on the distribution side, creating some exclusive content for different platforms. And that would be the kind of exclusive content that we would want to create, is this extended interview with narrating. You've just finished listening to an entire book. To hear the narrator and the author discussing it, I think is really exciting. As well as having the narrator record something else, some supplemental material, some extra material, something that you can put up on your website that is exclusive to this book, to this series. Those are ways of just getting something to talk about that gets people excited about the audiobook. We should talk some about podcasting, and I'm sure it's been coming up. So I think everyone's starting to realize podcasts are a valuable space for audio and for getting your voice out there. There are many author-related podcasts, independent author-related podcasts. So again, trying to use the audiobook as a way of bringing the content into a podcast, or having the narrator be on a podcast with you. It's something that we're scheduling for a book that we did recently. We're going to have the narrator and the author talking to a third, to someone who has a podcast on independent authors. So absolutely looking at what's happening in podcasting and trying to get, pushing the book, but also pushing the audiobook as part of podcasting. I think that's a really good crossover space that people would be more interested maybe in going to the audiobook first. The couple other things that we're working with, when you publish a book on on Audible, excuse me, you get a bunch of free credits that you can send to reviewers, and that is absolutely a great benefit that you should take advantage of. If you distribute through us, we pass those on to you. We get those and then pass them back to the author. There is a mailing list, a weekly mailing list, sort of like a BookBub, called Audiobook Boom, and it has free audiobooks. And what it is that narrators end up with all of these credits, and they don't, for a book that they uploaded to ACX, and they don't know what to do with them. So they'll throw them over to these guys at Audiobook Boom, and he'll send out his weekly newsletter and be like, hey, here's a free book, here's a free, and whoever, first come, first serve, people will, and with the understanding that if they're going to listen for free, they should really leave some sort of review. As part of today's talk, we're going to email everyone a list of the many book bloggers who write about audiobooks. And so that's also a network to tap into and get those people talking about the audiobook. And there's a pretty nice list right now that people who, that's what they do. They listen to audiobooks and they write about them and review them. These are the main ways that we're finding getting a book out there in a different way, in a different voice. Now, there are certainly I'd say in the next year to 2 years, there will be more attention paid on bringing lesser known, less visible audiobooks to the fore. Something that we're going to be doing is creating hold on one second.
Your
hi,
cat.
Yeah.
We saw her sneaking up behind you.
What are you doing? I need to be there now. Hold on. Trying to mute me. So creating author pages is going to be a project we're working on, a way to promote individual authors on we have Listen Up has a retail site as well. We're going to be redesigning that and really making it about the authors that we're working with and creating individual author pages so that it's much more focused. As well as, I know a couple of publishers are going to be doing this, where sort of on Netflix right now, if you look for a movie on Netflix and they don't have it, right? They only have a limited supply, but then they'll have a list of other movies that somehow are like that movie. And so I know a couple of people who are working on that as well, a way where if you're looking for a title, well, they don't have that title, but here are a bunch of, and really bringing up those independent titles that are within the genre or within the style, or, and it's certainly one of the areas where metadata will play a role. And so I should mention, metadata is very important. We do a lot of it on our side and really try to, and it's getting better, but the better it gets, the more discoverable books
And
will
you
be.
spoke about podcasting as a gateway drug, and I'm wondering, would you advise a writer who wanted to, seriously focus on audio, particularly maybe if they were the type of person who did want to narrate their own work, maybe nonfiction book or that kind of thing? Would you advise them to have a podcast that kind of on a similar subject, on a theme that would then logically
to create their own podcast?
Mm.
I do. I think I do recommend people creating podcasts, especially if you're a storyteller, because that is your job. And writing is certainly one thing, but the skill of telling stories, and the best podcasts are able to tell those stories. I think that there are podcasts which are very, like, many of the book podcasts are very focused on kind of industry, the talking to people within the industry, explaining, like people like me, and but I think that if you're going to create a podcast as an author, nonfiction or fiction, it shouldn't be about books necessarily so much as the thing that you're most interested in. I describe my favorite podcasts as that they're ostensibly about A, but really they're about B. And those are, I don't know how to create, something when you think about it, you're like, oh, I want to make a podcast about, I don't know, like I'm a World War II historian. I'm going to make a podcast about World War II events. Okay, well, that's what it's going to be about, but what's it really about? And try to sort of always have this other thing that it's about as well. Makes for, there's a podcast called Reply All, which is about technology, but really it's about sort of the sadness of human interaction and the beauty. But like what it's about is technology, and that sort of being able to, when you think about a podcast, always make sure that there's sort of the thing you want to talk about, but then the other thing that you want to make sure is in there as well. And so, yeah, I think that podcasting is, we also have a podcast network that we're beginning because it's what we love, and we're starting even on fiction podcasts. Radio drama is coming back into popularity. Audible just is giving a $5 million fund to playwrights to create audio fiction. So if you're out there and you want to, it's a good time to be writing audio fiction. It's as well. So yes, I recommend starting your own podcast. It takes a lot of work and a lot of consistent effort, but they don't need to be that long. And that's one thing that people, you're like, you can do a 15-minute podcast every week about, and that's more than enough. If you don't know how to edit, hire an editor and have someone else for relatively cheap. They can edit it for you and put it out in the world.
Yeah, it's actually stunningly cheap. I have somebody who does that for me. I haven't been podcasting regularly, but I think it is something I'm going to get into much more as I move into doing audiobooks. And I am actually very surprised. I could just kind of talk it and do it. And I have set up a kind of a mini booth, and I know how important that is. And then he just takes it and makes it sound completely, so much better. It's
Right.
extraordinary how much better it sounds when he's done his thing in all sorts of ways. I don't even know how he does it, but it's kind of magic.
Yes, it is magic. And it again, it's like, it's, editors love doing this, and it's generally not that expensive, and for shorter, stuff as well.
Especially.
So, and then I just want to briefly talk about, because I brought up this stuff with the Audible and this fund. The biggest reason that Audible is investing so heavily in audio fiction is because of the Amazon Echo. And these home devices.
Can you just explain for people who haven't got a clue what Amazon is?
Absolutely. So Amazon was the first to come out of the gate with their home assistant device that you can talk to. And you say, Alexa, what's the weather? And Alexa will tell you the weather. So it's like Siri on your phone, but it's a standalone device that you can ask questions, and you can stream music through, and you can even put things on your Amazon shopping list. And now Google has one, Microsoft is coming out with one, and Apple is going to be coming out with one. So this is a new area that will grow in the next 2 years to be ubiquitous, where you talk to things and they talk back to you. And what Amazon quickly realized is, oh, this is a platform for people listening to audiobooks. And well, there should be other entertainment. And well, because now it's almost like a television set. Back in the early days, it's this thing, it's an appliance that's sitting there, but it can entertain you. And they see this opportunity. And so everyone is moving very quickly into this space. Google will soon have the ability to, you can pay for things with it. So you can just buy stuff. So you can, am I clicking again? Sorry. You can, so if you hear a sample of an audiobook and you go, oh, I want to buy that, you can just buy it with your voice. So these are also, this is going to expand the market for audiobooks, I think, dramatically. Cars as well, because this same system will also be in the car. So you're not going to be bound, stuck listening to the radio or having to pair your Bluetooth device and not really working, or maybe so it will be in the car, and you can say, hey, I want to hear the audiobook I was listening to, or I want to buy an audiobook. So these are all, for within the industry, we see a lot of opportunity for growth, and with that growth, a lot of people working on the discoverability side, because when you're in an audio-only environment, it's impossible to discover anything, right? And at least you can browse a screen and see a bunch of audiobooks or a bunch of titles or covers. When you're in audio-only, you can only ask for the things you already know. So there are a lot of really good developers working on what's discoverability going to be like in audio, and how can new things be found. So it creates a lot of opportunity there as well.
Great.
Still early, but
yeah, very interesting, and very interesting to hear about where things are going. Back to promotion and marketing. Could you give us an example of one or two authors you've worked with, and how you promoted them and kind of developed their listenership?
Sure. It's it mainly through, again, the means that I've already given, in trying to get other we have relationships with a lot of these bloggers, getting them talking about a new book coming out. Series are great. I think a lot of series authors, series make a lot of sense for audio. So if you are a series author and you're on book 7 and it's doing really well, go back to book 1 and start recording that, and then really promoting book 1 as getting a new audience listening to the entire series from the start. People love to stick with a narrator, and they love to stick with an author, so series do very well in audio. So it's, oh wow, sorry, hold on. Siri just thought I was talking to Siri.
Well, you were talking about
right. So we've done, I can't say we've done anything all that different from what I've already talked about. Is really trying to, some of the things we've done in specific are trying to position any promotion we do around events related to the book in some way. We did a true crime book that came out around, it was after Serial, but really trying to do promotion of this true crime audiobook. Sort of, if you like Serial, you'll really like, this story. So a lot of it, the promotion that we have done, a lot of different promotions we've done have been around specific events or other experiences that relate back to that title that we're trying to push. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. So thank you so much for coming in. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to say to people before we wrap up.
Let's see. Like I said, I will be sending out the more information on, if you have an audiobook and you want to get it in front of the right eyes, we'll send that out to everyone. And yeah, I think, if you have any questions, people are free to reach out to me as well. I think my information is all on the page with this talk. So
Yes,
feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer questions, and I won't try to sell you on anything that you don't want to buy, because there are a lot of options out there, and it's really about finding the option that's best for you.
And is there a particular kind of writer that you guys suit better than others, or?
We do everything. I mean, it is a good question. Something to keep in mind: which titles work best in audio, purely in terms of sales, not in terms of experience. Thrillers, romance, mysteries. Those are probably science fiction. So those are the top categories. Nonfiction in audio is the biggest titles do well, but not, it's not the biggest category in audio. Even though it's more men than women are listening, it's not huge. The short stories are not yet, but that's more because of the way that they've been sold. Audible, for example, they want you to buy a long book. They don't want you to buy a bunch of short books because of their market model. But because of things like the Google Home and Alexa, I think short stories will actually be a great, I only want 10 minutes. Give me a story in 10 minutes. Boom. So I think short stories will start to be big again. And kids' books as well, I think, haven't been that big. But once you're in a car and you can be like, play me a kid's book, then those will also become a bigger category. So those are good to know. But in terms of what works in audio, almost everything works. Cookbooks still don't work, but other than that.
Okay, that's great. Well, we'll be looking at your predictions, and we'll have you back in a year or two and see if you were right.
Please be right.
If not before. So thank you so much for coming in to Indie Author Fringe and telling us about it. Thank you for sharing your bloggers list. I know that's going to be really useful to people who want to get their books out there, and that's the kind of information that's quite difficult to get.
Yep.
And I think you're going to be on Twitter later for people if they want to, you keep an eye on it. Our feed is hopping. I think we're trending. So it will be great if you can kind of take a look there later too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not at all. Have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.